This is about survival. It isn't the American dream. We offer the American dream to no one here.
With the level of problems that people have, we're only working on a small component of their lives.
The community that doesn't have the financial resources to provide for itself, I always consider it to be voiceless. You need an organization that provides the voice to the voiceless.
Legal Services brings a constructive voice to real issues.
It levels the playing field for both sides of the litigation.
We cannot only be a court system available to those who can pay.
I think that many people think of legal services as something charitable, and I think that's the wrong way to look at it. The purpose of legal services is not to give something to the poor other than the justice that everybody is entitled to.
There are many people, working people, people with disabilities, people that are retired, seniors, all struggling to try and make it with too little money in a high-cost area.
So people are having to make choices between rent and clothing or rent and food.
They talk about poverty being down in our state, but the real poverty level in a high-cost state like New Jersey is about 2.5 times what the federal poverty level is. And 30% of the families in our state fall below that level.
Well, I live here like probably 10 or more years old.
Dolores was the very first client I went to court with when I started this job back in 1999.
They sent me letters that I have to move, and I got a lot of problems with them. But I was paying my rent, I paid everything that they told me to pay.
It looked like a regular landlord and tenant relationship, but when she brought all her documents in, it appeared that she was in a lease purchase agreement with her then landlord, Beneficial Bank. And all of the rent money that she was paying at the time went directly towards the purchase price, which I think at the time was about $15,000. In 1999, they wanted to stop the agreement, but in fact, Dolores had communicated so much in writing with Beneficial, recommitting herself to the property, that there was no way that they could prove that she had not done everything she was supposed to do.
We went to court and we won. Thank God. I got my house, and I feel grateful because I had a peace of mind.
We went together to the settlement, and she purchased this property.
I feel like I supposed to have the house before.
You know, there's a saying that says, without equal access, there's no equal justice. And she would not have had the access to legal representation if it wasn't for legal services.
The original mission of legal services was to make legal services affordable and available to members of our community who otherwise would not be able to afford legal services.
I suppose it really started with the U.S. Supreme Court deciding that lawyers had to be assigned in serious criminal cases. Then I think Bobby Kennedy got interested in the possibility of expanding that to civil cases as well, because the line isn't really as abrupt as people think it is.
Economic and social justice have both been at the core of the National Legal Services vision since the program was created.
There was a time in the 60s when there was a great deal of concern about poverty, there was a great deal of concern about civil rights for Robert Kennedy, and surprisingly, Lyndon Johnson were extremely interested in trying to lift the poor out of poverty. And I think a piece of that was legal services.
Of course, we were accused of being communists, Maoists, and all the rest by more conservative elements in Congress.
In New Jersey, the first of those programs was the program in the city of Newark, which started in 1966.
Our offices opened in September of 1966. At that time, the idea was to have neighborhood legal services offices, storefront lawyers.
And Newark at that time was a city racked with poverty and intense racial hostilities. The purpose was to give people a means of seeking redress other than just the streets.
After a lot of early successes in court around the country, there was a counterattack against the program at the national level and led to the creation of the National Legal Services Corporation in 1974 as an attempt to insulate legal services from political pressures.
The Campaign for Justice was one of the responses to the Reagan reduction in federal funding for legal services in the early 1980s. And it is a statewide campaign to raise funds principally directed at the private bar, but not exclusively.
Legal services, I think, as an institution, is welcomed in New Jersey. We get along very well with both political parties.
We're not a partisan issue. Justice is not a partisan issue.
I had been in a 17-year relationship with somebody who was very controlling, very abusive in every sense. And it was very detrimental and harmful to my 3 children.
Diane is a client or former client of our Domestic Violence Representation Project.
Desperate times call for desperate measures, and that's when I reached out to Legal Services to see what was available to me and what services they could provide for me.
These cases are really about the people who are telling their stories and whether they're believable. And it really comes down to the person telling their story. And as attorneys, we just try to guide them in the best way to do that.
She opened my eyes to a lot of what my rights are as a woman and a domestic violence victim.
She came into this demonstrating a much more timid person than she turned out to be.
Because of Deborah, I've been able to take a stand for myself, knowing what my rights are as a woman, as a mother, as a person.
The end result was she got a final restraining order. She was able to stay in the marital home. We were able to get support for her. It's still a struggle. I don't want to make it sound like this is the end of the story.
I'm still fighting to get the child support that is due me. He has violated the final restraining order.
I think it's safe to say that the improvement in her family, in the children and in herself, has been just immense.
You know, I'm not going to be abused anymore. My children aren't going to see it or hear it. And to that, I owe a great deal to Legal Services of New Jersey.
I was being harassed. The deck was stacked against me. And it got to a point where I had to quit because of the stress level that I was under.
Rosetta Walker had come to our office with an unemployment matter.
And by me quitting, they were saying that I was ineligible to collect unemployment. And I tried to let them know why I had to quit. But it was like basically didn't want to hear it.
And I knew it was going to be a very difficult case when you're dealing with when somebody quits their job. But fortunately, she had kept good notes on what had gone on.
It was like finally someone is listening to me, along with the legal part of it.
Properly presenting it so that she could prevail would have been very difficult for her to do.
I couldn't afford to go out and get a lawyer, but thank God for Legal Services.
We were able to show that she did not voluntarily quit, but it was through their actions that forced her to leave her work.
How they changed my life? Basically letting me know that I have a right to stand up for what I believe.
Legal Services statewide handles about 50 to 55,000 cases a year, because we're turning away 4 out of every 5 who need help.
And at the end of the day, it's not just a number, but a human being.
I think everyone tries to deal with the cases that are going to have the most impact on the clients.
The triage of which clients get served and which ones don't, we try to do the best we can, but it's a terrible thing.
In addition, we have a responsibility to be a voice, not only for those clients that are coming to the door, but for those that get turned away and for those that don't make it here.
We participate in government forums. We lobby the legislature.
Where we see issues that are recurrent in the client community, we usually try to find other ways than just individual litigation to change the situation.
A case known as the Mount Laurel case imposes the responsibility of affordable housing into a region rather than containing it solely into one municipality.
I've been involved in a case starting in 1988 to ensure one-for-one replacement of the public housing.
Early in our history, we won a series of victories on behalf of consumers that beat back certain fraudulent practices that prey on people in low-income areas.
We do everything that's civil. We don't do any criminal work at all.
My specialty is SSI disability, for people that are permanently disabled.
We represent migrant and seasonal farm workers statewide. We do community legal education, which includes citizenship classes.
Most of my clients are tortured, they have scars, and they fled their countries to come and seek asylum in the U.S.
You end up doing a lot more than just being a lawyer sometimes. You're an advisor, you're a counselor.
What Legal Services does runs the gamut from brief advice to full representation through litigation, trial court, appellate court, even the Supreme Court if the case calls for it.
We mostly deal with the basic necessities, housing, income, family issues.
I have problems in my country and I'm running away from my life.
She was a member of the Sierra Leonean People's Party, which is the opposition group in Sierra Leone. The Revolutionary United Front rebels came to her house.
They said they want me dead or alive. They beat me, they raped me, and they took me to their camp for 3 days. So I escaped from the camp.
When she got back to her house had been burned down.
So I walked from Sierra Leone to Guinea with my family. So I was bleeding. We walked about 2 weeks, but because of the problems, they don't want us in the country. I tried to tell my mother, I said, let me try to get away out of this country. So I have a friend, she gave me her passport. So when I came to the airport, they arrested me. They told me that they have to send me back home. So I told them that I'm not going anywhere. Instead of you to send me back home, let me live here and die here, but I will not go back. So they told me that if you don't want to go back, we'll put you to jail. I said, I don't mind. I prefer going to jail than to go back to my country. So they told me that the only way that will help me out is to get an attorney.
She had a lot of difficulty recounting her story. She would break down after almost every other question because of the gang rape and also because of the torture that she endured from the rebels. She came across very well in the courtroom and the judge granted the case. In fact, he was so horrified that the case was granted in 30 minutes.
In the end, I won my case. I did not pay anything.
Her parents and her kids, unfortunately, are still there. But she says to date she hears they're in a safe place and that makes her feel good. So I'm working on getting her son and daughter to come to the U.S.
That's a great thing she has done for me in this world. I don't even know what to say. God just brought her to take care of my problem.
The Constitution recites that we were formed in order to establish justice and to secure the blessings of liberty.
We live in a very complicated society, and rules and regulations, for most of us, are protections from arbitrary acts on the part of government. But I think when you get to the very poor, to the immigrants, they're not. They're almost oppressive.
Without lawyers, they can founder, they can make mistakes, and their rights can either be taken advantage of or violated outright.
I don't see how you can have justice in a society unless everybody has access.
Access doesn't just mean being able to walk in the courthouse door. It means being able to appear in front of a judge with adequate and competent counsel who can represent your interests fully and completely, and Legal Services provides precisely that.
In a legalistic society like ours, it is very difficult to have access to justice without access to a lawyer.
We must serve everyone, rich and poor alike.
We have to stop with the fiction that all are getting access to justice. They aren't.
Some mornings by 8 a.m., we have 30 new applicants.
Essex County has averaged over the last 10 years about 50,000 eviction cases filed each year. In all of 2000, we only handled maybe 3,000 out of 50,000.
We are rationing justice on a daily basis simply because there are insufficient resources to afford everyone with civil legal needs access to our system of justice.
I looked at the mission statement for our courts and the mission statement for legal services. They're so close in their goals.
Equal justice is one of the most cherished ideals of our society and a core value of the legal profession.
It's very important for each individual attorney, irrespective of that attorney's practice area or workload, to ensure that he or she actually provides direct legal services to the disadvantaged. If we don't do that, then those words become just rhetoric and not reality.
The working partnership between the courts and legal services, I think, makes the system of justice we have in this state a better system.
Access to the courts is central to the New Jersey State Bar Association as a mission. We think it's very important that people have access to the courts. Legal Services provides that access.
Without the support of the bar, first, I don't think we'd enjoy the funding we enjoy, because they support us, they lobby for us. But more importantly, they encourage lawyers not only to be generous with dollars for legal services, but to be generous with their time. And corporate lawyers are important to us too, for the same reason.
Merck has a long-standing connection with LSNJ. Roughly 50% of our lawyers at any given time are working with legal services representing the disadvantaged. We represent a number of clients in areas such as domestic violence, Social Security, landlord-tenant. Those are not the kinds of cases that one would expect to have in a corporate context.
Without all of these pieces together, we couldn't even serve the 20% of the population need that we do serve.
I have custody of my sister's 4 children. They were kidnapped by their father.
Sean came to our office seeking assistance because the Bloomfield Housing Authority, a local public housing authority, was trying to take her Section 8 voucher away.
I had just got it after being on the waiting list for 8 years.
Without a Section 8 voucher, Sean could not afford to live in the community where she was living.
And someone called Section 8 and said I didn't have the kids.
Bloomfield Housing Authority found out about it. They proceeded to terminate her for fraud.
I was in the process of fighting for the children, trying to find the children. I went through missing children, DYFS, the police. I tracked down schools they went to.
We tried to resolve it on its face. You would think it would be a straightforward situation. It eventually took our office having to sue the housing authority, and once we filed suit, they promptly dropped the matter and agreed to give her a voucher back and let her live in peace with her children, who are now back in the apartment.
If it wasn't for Newark Legal Services, I don't know where I'd be. Without them, we'd be homeless.
1995, we came to New Jersey.
Maria, she is a legal permanent resident who wants to be a new citizen.
My parents and my older sister work in the field, and I was 15 years old when I just came here, so didn't want younger people working in the field.
I met this family a long time ago, and when they come here, they were the same me. They don't speak the language. So I create a program, ESL classes, where I teach my English and I help them a little bit.
My father didn't want me to go to school because he told me that I had to stay in the house and take care of my brother and my sister, that they couldn't stay in the house as they would do in Mexico. So the season was over. My dad decided that I could go to school. So I started high school.
This family, they have 2 kids already in college, and you will see the change of them, or the change of this family.
I graduated last year from Cumberland Regional High School, and I'm going to college on Mains Landing. I'm also a volunteer for legal services to teach other people English.
Payback, she said. I want to pay back for whatever your program did for my family.
I'm going to be a chef.
We simply are not going to be able to serve all the legal needs just by asking the private bar to step in. We've got to increase the basic staff core.
You have highly qualified people who have their own expenses, and if they can't afford to work in legal services, we're going to lose them.
I lost a very good young associate recently to a large firm in Bergen County, and she was almost crying in my office. I'm sorry, Ann, I'm sorry, I don't want to leave. I owe $30,000 in student loans, and I have to pay them off.
People in legal services come to legal services because they know it's an organization questing toward justice.
People often say, oh, well, you work at legal services because you couldn't work, at a big firm with 300 people, and that's not it. People that work for legal services are committed to the mission of legal services. They can work anywhere. We go up against all the biggest firms in New Jersey and Philadelphia. That's not the issue. We work here because this is more than just a job. It's more than just a career. It's about changing people's lives.
You see wonderful results for people that they likely would not have achieved had they not come through legal services.
For the attorneys, it's just the pure practice of law. They don't have to worry about rainmaking. We got plenty of clients.
I can't conceive of myself doing any other kind of work because it's become a life. It's a good life. It's being part of something. It's doing something that you think is important and working with other people that are all struggling for the common good. So I feel that it's a good way to live your life.
I look at it as a privilege. And the day that I leave legal services, it will be the day that I stop practicing law.
The legal services program is a vital part of the American system of justice.
The vision is straightforward: 100% access to equal justice.
The fundamental economic problems remain. So in that sense, what it was really formed to address is still there to be addressed.
Even those little frustrations, the things that look like failures, are all strikes against that rock of social injustice. And eventually, all those will accumulate, and real positive change will occur.
It's not going to lift them out of poverty, but it's going to make the system more fair and make the system more what it claims to be.
Ultimately, the Legal Services Program offers to society the promise of rule by law. If you have a grievance, no matter what your station, there is a system that will hear that fairly. If we can't offer that to people, we can't ask them and expect them to live by laws, because the laws then have no meaning for them.